India's defense revolution is bigger than BrahMos. When people talk about India's military power, three names usually dominate the conversation: BrahMos, Agni, Tejas. But what if India's most important defense transformation isn't happening around one famous missile or fighter jet? What if it's happening through a whole network of lesser-known systems? One can turn a conventional bomb into a precision weapon. Another can hunt tanks without continuous guidance. Another is designed for the age of cheap drones. And one isn't even a missile. It is essentially a battlefield brain. Together, these systems reveal something much bigger. India is trying to build an entire indigenous warfare ecosystem, and that could be more important than any single weapon. 1. Tara, turning conventional bombs into precision weapons. Let's start with one of the newest developments. In May 2026, India conducted the maiden flight trial of Tactical Advanced Range Augmentation, or TARA. The concept is fascinating. A conventional unguided bomb is relatively simple. It is dropped from an aircraft and follows a ballistic trajectory. But add a guidance system and a glide capability, and that weapon can potentially be released from greater distances and directed toward a specific target. In other words, India is trying to turn relatively conventional munitions into precision weapons. Why does that matter? Because modern warfare isn't simply about having the most technologically sophisticated missile. It's also about how many precision weapons you can afford to use. A very expensive cruise missile is extremely capable, but you may not want to fire one at every target. A more affordable precision-guided glide weapon could potentially be produced and deployed in much larger numbers. And this is one of the important lessons emerging from modern warfare. Precision is becoming increasingly important, but so is quantity. Tara therefore represents more than another Indian weapon. It represents India's attempt to combine precision, range, and potentially lower cost mass deployment. NAG Mk-2, the tank killer. Now move from the sky to the battlefield. India's NAG Mk-2 is a third-generation anti-tank guided missile. Its most important feature is fire and forget capability. The operator identifies and locks onto the target. The missile is launched, and after launch, the missile can guide itself toward the target rather than requiring continuous operator control. But there is another important feature: top attack. Think about how a tank is designed. Its armor is generally strongest around the areas most likely to face direct attacks, but the upper surfaces are comparatively more vulnerable. A top attack missile exploits that weakness, and this is becoming increasingly important because the battlefield is changing. Tanks are no longer threatened only by other tanks. They face anti-tank missiles, drones, loitering munitions, and artillery. So NAG Mk-2 isn't simply about destroying tanks. It is part of India's effort to develop an indigenous anti-armor warfare capability. And to the three VSHORADS, India's answer to the drone problem. And now we reach perhaps the biggest transformation in modern warfare: the drone. A drone can be relatively inexpensive, but destroying it with a sophisticated interceptor can sometimes be far more expensive. This creates a problem known as the cost exchange ratio. If an attacker can repeatedly send inexpensive drones while the defender has to use expensive missiles to destroy them, the defender can eventually face an economic problem. India's Very Short-Range Air Defense System, or VSHORADS, is designed for the short-range air defense environment. India conducted successive trials of the system in February 2026 against high-speed, low-altitude targets, including targets representing drone-type threats. And in July 2026, India's Defense Acquisition Council approved procurement of VSHORADS. The significance goes beyond one missile. India is adapting its air defense architecture to a battlefield where the threat may not always be a fighter aircraft or a cruise missile. It could be a small drone flying extremely low, and that means future air defense increasingly has to be layered. Long-range systems, medium-range systems, short-range missiles, guns, electronic warfare, and increasingly systems specifically designed to deal with inexpensive unmanned threats. Akashteer, the battlefield brain. But here's where India's defense transformation becomes much more interesting, because one of the most important systems on this list isn't actually a missile, it's Akashteer. Imagine an air defense network with radars, sensors, guns, and missiles. Individually, each system can be powerful. But what happens if they don't share information effectively? A radar detects an incoming target. One unit sees it, another unit doesn't. A third unit doesn't know whether another weapon has already engaged it. The result can be slow decision making and inefficient use of weapons. Akashteer is designed to help solve this problem. It is an indigenous automated air defense command and control system intended to connect sensors and air defense assets and provide a common operational picture. And this tells us something important about modern warfare. The battlefield is increasingly becoming sensors, data, decision, weapon. The weapon is only the final step. The side that can detect the threat faster, process information faster, and coordinate weapons faster may have a decisive advantage. That's why Akashteer could be strategically more important than it initially appears. It is not simply another weapon, it is part of the network connecting the weapons together. 5. Astra, India's battle for the missile's eyes. Now let's return to the air. India's Astra is an indigenous beyond visual range air-to-air missile. But one of the most important developments isn't simply the missile itself. It is the development of its indigenous radio frequency seeker technology. Think of the seeker as the missile's eyes. The rocket motor provides propulsion, the warhead provides destructive power, but the seeker has to help the missile detect and track its target. Without effective guidance and seeker technology, having a powerful rocket motor doesn't make a missile a modern air combat weapon. In July 2025, India successfully tested an indigenous RF seeker associated with Astra, and this is strategically significant because indigenous defense isn't only about assembling a weapon inside India, it's about controlling the critical technologies inside the weapon. That distinction matters. A country can manufacture a missile, but if some of its most important components still depend heavily on foreign suppliers, its strategic autonomy remains limited. India is therefore trying to move further up the technology chain. 6. ATAGS. Why artillery still matters. Finally, let's talk about something that may seem much less futuristic. Artillery. India's Advanced Towed Artillery Gun System, or ATAGS, is a 155mm 52 caliber artillery system. India has approved procurement of 307 ATAGS guns for 15 artillery regiments. But why is artillery important in the age of drones and precision missiles? Because recent warfare has demonstrated something surprising. Artillery never really went away. In fact, drones can make artillery more effective. A drone can identify a target, transmit its location, help direct artillery fire, and then observe the result. So you can get a chain like drone, target identification, data, artillery, damage assessment. That is not old-fashioned warfare. That's a combination of old and new technologies. And ATAGS represents India's attempt to modernize one of the oldest forms of battlefield firepower. Now step back and look at all 6 systems together. Tara is about precision strike, NAG Mk-2 is about anti-armor warfare, VSHORADS is about the drone age, Akashteer is about battlefield networking, Astra is about advanced air combat and indigenous seeker technology, and ATAGS is about modern artillery warfare. These aren't 6 unrelated projects. Together, they reveal a much bigger ambition. India is trying to build an increasingly self-reliant military ecosystem in which sensors detect the target, networks distribute the information, command systems make decisions, aircraft, missiles, artillery, and drones deliver the effect. And increasingly, India wants to control the technology behind every stage. So perhaps the wrong question is, what is India's next BrahMos? The more important question is, can India build an entire military ecosystem around weapons like BrahMos? Because the future of warfare may not be decided by one spectacular missile. It may be decided by who can connect drones, sensors, artificial intelligence, missiles, artillery, and air defense into one system. And if India's current development trajectory continues, its defense transformation could ultimately be much bigger than BrahMos. It could be about building the entire battlefield.